Hi, today I'm just going to paint while I talk because I need to paint and I thought it might be more interesting than just looking at a close-up of my face. so, so today I'm going to talk to you guys about the Monday before this last one. We were having a week of prayer at the church, and so we were all kind of praying separately or whatever together. And sometimes God talks to me with like physical sensations as part of it. So what I was feeling was like I was standing like this, like kind of worshiping, talking to God, and then I felt like kind of it felt like, I don't know how to tell you this, but it felt like, I thought, my impression was it felt like warm oil in my hands. And then God, the Holy Spirit, started telling me that He wants to give me the oil of joy instead of mourning or whatever, like in Isaiah 60, I think it is, or 61. 61? It's 61. There in the beginning where He talks about giving beauty instead of ashes and the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of weakness and hopelessness. And yeah, so then He was telling me like that He wants to reframe my whole life for this, like, because I need a new perspective on everything that's ever happened to me. And everything, like my whole life. I need a new perspective. That's why I have sorrow and grief, is because of the way I see things. Like, a lot of it is just from that. And so he had been talking to me earlier from like Psalm 45 about forget your people in your father's house. And so then it made sense when he said that he wants to reframe everything, because like the way I grew up, the way we were taught to view everything was just such a, like, it was like through the filter of fear and worry and anxiety, and just like this belief, although you would never say it, but there was, you could tell by the way people lived that there was this belief that, that God doesn't care about anything that we're going through. So if you're going to get any help, you're going to help yourself, because He doesn't care, And so obviously if you view life that way, it's going to be depressing and scary and awful. So, but he was saying that, and it says in there, it says, listen, O daughter, look and incline your ear, pay attention. So he was saying, you need to sit with me, you need to listen to me, you need to pay attention to me, because I want to give you new filters, like filters of peace and joy, and knowing who God really is, that He, He feels with us. He's a God of compassion. He feels with us, and that He shows kindness. He bends down to show kindness to us, and He is slow to anger and abundant in loving kindness and trustworthiness. So to have like a whole different filter for everything in my life. And I kind of blogged about all this too, but I just wanted to, oh geez, I don't know if I want to. Anyways, I'm trying to think about this picture too. So the part about him feeling with us stood out to me, and I remember that verse in Psalms that says, something about him putting our tears in a bottle. And so I looked it up when I got home, and it says, Psalm 56:8, you have kept track of and recounted my wandering. Oh, put my tears in your bottle. Are they not in your book? So that God, he's taking notes like of our sorrows, and he's taking notes of the things that happens to us. He notices, and I noticed that the first mention, while I was in there looking that up, the first mention of tears in the Bible, because first mention is often significant, it tells you something significant about a concept in the Bible, and the first mention of tears is actually not until 1 Kings 20, verse 5, and it's God talking to Hezekiah, and he said, I have heard your prayers, and I have seen your tears. That he's paying attention when we're sad, he feels with us. And then Psalm 147:3, he heals the brokenhearted and wraps up their sorrows firmly, like for healing. And in verse 6 of 147, it says, Yahweh relieves the downtrodden, the pressed down ones, and he throws the wicked to the ground. And so then I was just thinking about that, like how he has like watcher angels that take notes of everything, and that he wants us to ask for justice in the courts of heaven, because we can take our case there, because all the evidence is already there, because all the books are there that that God has been paying attention. He's been taking notes through these watcher angels, like it talks about in Daniel. I looked it up. Daniel 4, I think it was. Watcher angels. And that justice and restitution is one of those spiritual blessings in heavenly places mentioned in Ephesians 1, that he wants to manifest in our physical life as part of his goodness that can be seen by other people. That he makes it up to us for our suffering, and that he rights the wrongs in our life. And so in verse 7 of Psalm 45, it talks about Jesus, that he's anointed with the oil of gladness more than his companions, and it says it's because he loves justice and hates wickedness. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because sometimes, we as humans, we love justice and hate wickedness, and it makes us upset and disturbed and just raises our blood pressure, and we're not happy at all. But he is, because he's not afraid to ask for justice, and he's not afraid to administer justice, because he knows what's right, and he does it. And so, like, as people that are made to follow him and imitate him, that we need to not tolerate so much injustice in our lives and in the lives of our loved ones, and in just in the world in general. Like, we tolerate too much injustice, like it talks about in Psalm 82. Don't lift up the face of the wicked. You need to get up and rescue the people that are being oppressed and stuff. And so then I was thinking, where did I go from there? It was, I was in Isaiah for some reason, and Isaiah 60, 61, I guess, talking about the oil of joy. And I noticed that it said in Isaiah 61, I don't know if I have this written down anywhere, but, oh yeah, here. Isaiah 61:2, where it's talking about how Jesus was anointed to preach the good news and set the captives free and open the blind eyes and all this. If you remember that. It says, to proclaim the acceptable year of Yahweh, which is the year in which his favors profusely abound, and the day of our God's vengeance, to comfort all who mourn, to comfort those who mourn in Zion. And it goes on to talk about giving beauty for ashes and the oil of joy for mourning and the garment of praise instead of the spirit of hopelessness. And so I noticed that the day of God's vengeance was right there talking about our comfort. And I realized that sometimes in order for us to have comfort and have our sorrow turn to joy, sometimes we need justice for things that have been taken from us and things that we have suffered. And that's part of God being the God of all comfort, is that he does, give us justice. And then I was noticing in Isaiah 59 where it talks about all of this. But I had this other conversation with God sometime during this whole thing where I was like, why am I remembering how evil my dad, was to us, and do you want to talk to me about this? And so I was having this conversation with him where it was like, religious abuse is the worst, where you teach people that God himself is on the abuser's side, condoning all that wickedness so that they don't have any recourse because he's the head of the house or whatever. It's kind of this religious garbage that we grew up with, that he would just like drive into our head at every chance so that he could keep oppressing people and abusing them, and we wouldn't fight back because we thought that God was on his side or whatever. And so this is hard stuff for me to talk about because I don't know, when you're a victim you always feel like afraid to like say anything because maybe someone's gonna retaliate in some way or something. But anyways, excuse me, it was just so evil, like when you look back on it, that the attitude of the religious people that we were around at that time, it was just like, well, if he wants to beat you, kill you, sexually abuse you, that's his right. He's the head of the house, and, you just have to submit or whatever. Like, that was, I don't think they knew that he was being so evil to us, but you know what I mean? I don't know how to explain. It was pretty awful, though. And we grew up thinking, like, you get this, what you learn from that is just like, now that I look back, it's like so obvious that this Pharisee thing was demonic, but we didn't know at the time, because we were kids. And, just that you're nothing but his property. No one cares what he does to you. They just tell you have to submit to him. It felt wrong, but we were in a no-win situation. There was nothing we could do about it. This is the source of our low self-esteem, because he taught us that we were worthless and no one cared about us, not even God. And the family I was around, relatives, they all said the same. No one was telling us any different. And it is a terrible injustice. And there were huge losses to all of us because of the way that was, the way we were taught. And my brother, like, he never questioned the existence of God. He just hated God because he thought, that God was this evil person, like our dad was teaching us. And so I was having this conversation with God, and he was saying, like, I'm so sorry all this happened to you, and I regret putting this man over you because he was terribly untrustworthy and didn't do what I wanted done at all. He was rebellious and evil. And yes, God can regret things. It says in 1 Samuel 15:35, when it talks about that after God told Samuel, you're not going to be king anymore. Told Saul through Samuel, you're not going to be king anymore. Then Samuel never went to see him anymore until the day of his death, it says. And then it says, and the Lord, Yahweh, regretted making Saul king over Israel. So it's really interesting. It's really fascinating, actually, to just study that whole thing, because like Samuel said, like the prophecy that Samuel had at the beginning of Saul's reign was like, yeah, this man's going to save us from the Philistines and all this, like this, and he really didn't. Like, it ended up being that Jonathan and David ended up doing all the work, and then Saul took the credit from Jonathan's victories because those were during his lifetime and stuff. But you can say, well, was Samuel a false prophet because Saul didn't save them from the Philistines or whatever? And no, that is what God said, but for some reason it seems almost like God was surprised that Saul took that turn for the worst or whatever. It's very interesting because, the omniscience of God and all this, but, just to see how it actually is in there. Anyways, that's a side note. I'm trying to stay on track here because I'm running out of time. And I was just like telling God, like, why didn't you take him out, our dad? Why didn't you take him out? Why did you let him continue to live and do evil to us? This was my brother's question too, like, and why was there no justice? And he said, I couldn't find anyone who would ask for justice. My people were all lifting up the face of the wicked, even your mom. Like it talks about in Psalm 82, lifting up the face of the wicked, like, even your mom, who knew how evil he was, had some kind of warped affection for him that threw off her sense of justice and righteousness. Plus, she was raised up to believe the same garbage that we were taught, so she was always kind of obstructing justice for him because of whatever. It was really awful, crazy. I can't even... like, I don't even like to talk about it, but at the same time, I feel like I wonder how many other people, went through similar things, because our dad was, he was an elder, he was a deacon. When we were little, he was a pastor, an associate pastor, and all of this. He's supposed to be a Christian, and he's one of the most evil people I've ever known, and for us to all grow up seeing that as, he's supposed to be a Christian, and this is how it is, it warps you, I think. It's not good for you. But and he was just like, it was the fact that both of your parents were mentally ill. I mean, my mom loved us, but she was not okay. That made your childhood so awful, and they absolutely refused to let me work on them or work with them for healing of their mental illnesses. They clung to their bad opinions of me and their need to control everything instead of me. And he was saying that, contrary to popular opinion, he said, I actually love justice and hate oppression. And he said Jesus wasn't saying I'm unjust in Matthew 5:38-41. He wasn't saying God says, he wasn't saying I'm unjust and you should be too. He was saying, interpret Bible with Bible. He was saying, leave room for God to avenge you by not avenging yourself, and ask God for justice in the courts of heaven, because he can avenge you better than you ever could. So Romans 12:17 to 21 is talking about letting God avenge you instead of you do it. And then Luke 18:1 through 8, talking about that Jesus said we should always pray and never give up. And he used the example of the widow that was asking for justice. And he said, in the same way as that judge finally relented, he said, will not your Father avenge you speedily? He said he will avenge you speedily, but nevertheless, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? Because, life is rough and everything, and we have to sometimes, and we have to be able to trust God that he's the judge of all the earth, and he's going to do what's right. So, anyways, this is getting really long, and I don't know if I can upload this. But, yeah, and just a lot of verses came to mind, like in 1 Samuel 24, 1 through 15, David shows us what that looks like. Because, he's running away from Saul, who's trying to kill him. And he's hiding in the cave with his men, and Saul comes in to relieve himself, and then David's men are like, hey, God's given your enemy into your hand, you can kill him and be done with this, and he's like, no. He's like, no, I won't touch the Lord's anointed, and my hand is not going to be on him, he said. And after he went out, David cut a little piece of his robe so that after he went out, he could see that, he had spared his life. But he said to Saul that, my hand won't be on you because wickedness comes from the wicked. But he said, may the Lord, let Yahweh judge between you and me, and let Yahweh avenge me of you and rescue me out of your hand. And that's what he told him, and that is what God did. Because Saul ended up falling in battle, and then God kept all his promises to David about David becoming king. So, and then also in 1 Samuel 25, in that story, where David actually was succumbing to those feelings of anger, and he wanted to avenge himself on this other guy, Nabal, that was just being a jerk to him. And Abigail, Nabal's wife at the time, she, kind of rescued him from that, because she came out to give him food and to tell him, don't avenge yourself, because you'll be sorry later, let God do it, basically. And then David listened to her, and so he didn't avenge himself, and then God did step in and avenge him on Nabal too. And when Abigail came home, Nabal had been drinking, and so she didn't tell him anything until the morning, when she told him that she went out and fed David and all his men when Nabal wouldn't do it. Then it says the Lord struck him, and he died 10 days later or something like that. I don't know what kind of a thing it was, but so Nabal, God did take care of that, and then David ended up marrying that Abigail, so, because she was like, when the Lord does everything he promised to you, David, remember me. And yeah, he came and got her. So, and then in Revelation 6, 9 through 11, the people that were martyred were asking God for vengeance for their blood was violently shed by people that hated God. And then later in Revelation 19:2, then the people are praising God because he did take vengeance, and he did do justice for his people that were violently killed for his sake and stuff. So I think that's all. Oh, in Psalm 18, 47 and 48, David talks about how God avenged him from Saul and saved him from the violent man and like that. So, is that it? I don't know. It's really long. Yeah, in Isaiah 59 It says, verse 8, they do not know the way of peace. No justice is in their tracks. They have made crooked paths for themselves. Everyone going in them does not know peace. I learned from my mom to have too much compassion on the abuser, on the wicked, too much concern for them and their feelings and needs and desires and expectations, so much that we allow the innocent to suffer injustice in order to cater to the feelings and needs of the wicked. This is injustice, and there's no peace in this way. And verse 9 says, for this reason justice is far from us, and rightness does not overtake us. We wait for light, but behold darkness, for brightness, but we sit in gloom. We walk in gloom. And it's because we were taught that God is on the side of the abuser because he's the head of the house, and we believed that God didn't care about our suffering. And so we didn't expect and therefore did not receive any supernatural help or deliverance from the abuse we suffered or from our bad situation. Yeah, and Dad drove this garbage into our head every chance he got because he knew that if we thought he had divine approval for the abuse and oppression that he wanted to do to us, we wouldn't fight it like we should. We were taught that God is unjust and evil, that he was siding with injustice and wickedness, which is seriously wicked slander that our dad perpetrated on us. So, you know. And then it says, verse 10, we grope the wall like the blind, and as having no eyes we grope. We stumble at noonday as in twilight. In an abundant field as the dead, all of us roar like bears, and like doves we sadly moan. We wait for justice, but there is none, for rescue, but it's far from us. And verse 14 says, and justice is driven back, and righteousness stands far off, because truth stumbles in the plaza, and right is not able to enter. So, and then, so then he talks about how, my goodness, he talks about how he looked, and that it displeased him that there was no justice, and he was looking for someone to intercede and ask for justice, and he couldn't find anyone to even do that. There was no one to be that interceder. And then it says that he just armed himself in righteousness and justice, and he got up to bring justice. And it talks about he put on vengeance as a cloak or something like that, and zeal. So, where was I going with that? Oh, and then in the end it says that the Redeemer comes to Zion, Isaiah 59:20, and to those in Jacob who turn from transgression declares Yahweh. So it's that God did save us eventually. Like, eventually we all grew up and were able to get out of that situation, but I think it would have been better if we had realized that God didn't approve of that and prayed for help and justice during the time that all of that was happening. But yeah, I'm thankful that eventually we all got out, we all survived to adulthood and like that. But anyways, so he did save us eventually. Anyways, this is really long, and I hope that it helps someone, because yeah. Blessings on you guys. Bye.